do we actually have the date when our first episode launched? Wasn't it September 5th?
I think it was September 4th, but I don't know. I suppose I could find out.
Yeah.
When the actual episode, not all the prequel stuff.
Yeah, not all the prequel stuff, but the actual episode. Yes.
Well, I always ask hard questions that, I'm not prepared for.
I have no idea. Why aren't you ever prepared for the questions I ask you?
September 5th.
Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma is meant for educational purposes only. Welcome back to Season 2 of Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. Mason Westbrook and I are your hosts. I am Sarah Westbrook, and we're excited to be here. It was a good break. Sort of.
Yeah. I don't know if there's much of a break for us, but here we are. So.
There is never a break for us. We are raising 3 special needs children. Life is always an adventure at the Westbrook home.
Sure. Adventure. That's the word we'll use.
Yeah. So I titled this episode Happy Anniversary. Our Happy Anniversary episode today is to review Season 1. We want to talk about how we did on meeting our goals. And so our very first episode, I wrote down, Mason, when we were listening to it, this is so long and boring.
You said it out loud too, apparently.
I did. I said it out loud, mostly because we talked a little bit about our stories and what led us to this. And I'm sure for somebody who's
So our story was boring?
Well, it was for me, mostly because I've told it so much recently and pieces of it. I was like, I don't want to listen to this. But hopefully for the listener, they enjoyed getting to know us a little bit. And so I thought that let's start today with a then and now. So Mason, how about you?
I got to start the then and now?
Well, I put you on our list. See, you're first.
I'm first?
And I'm second, probably because I have more to say.
I guarantee it.
Well, yeah. Yep. Yep, that's me.
So it's interesting listening to that episode again because as we're describing ourselves, one of the first things I said about myself is I'm still an active member of the church, still involved, still believing. And for those of you that have listened to the rest of our podcast, you'll see that that's not the case anymore. That's been a really hard transition. It's actually been fairly recent, but it's been difficult. It's also been just kind of a product of where I am. I was talking with a friend this morning, actually, on text, and she had asked about how am I feeling about leaving the church and about the fact that your book is out because, of course, there's lots of vulnerability in there.
Yeah. Well, and she read the book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's read it,
book,
and
so
she's
she
left
knows
a review
what she's
on
asking about.
Goodreads.
Yeah. There's lots of vulnerability in there, and of course, you'll talk a little bit more about that. But it's like I'm so busy and so overwhelmed right now that in some ways, not being involved in the church is actually just kind of a relief. It's one less thing I have to focus on, one less thing I have to worry about. Right.
So for our audience, our youngest son was just diagnosed with autism.
And not too long ago, our youngest daughter was donated. We've known for a while.
We've known about Abby's
autism. She was officially diagnosed with
autism.
autism just a couple of weeks ago, too. So,
but our youngest son almost burned our house down 3 times in the last couple of weeks. Not because he's trying to kill us, but just because of curiosity and an inability to really connect cause and effect. And so that was just really shocking. So yeah, our family we've been in the trenches a little bit over the last, I'm going to say July was just a rough month for the Westbrook
well, for the last
family.
2 or 3 weeks now, you've been struggling a lot more with your MS, and that leaves more for me to pick up and do, and so it's been overwhelming. The last several months, last year has been quite overwhelming, and so not being involved in a church is in some ways a relief. In some ways, I still miss it. I certainly miss the community. I miss just being involved. There's a lot of fulfillment that can come from that. And so I struggle with that still a little bit, but not too much simply because of just the overwhelm. There's not much time to focus on it and worry about it. But so that's where I am. So now I am I'm out. There's, a couple things along the way that just kind of really sealed the deal for me. There's a lot of things that we've talked about, a lot of things that we've listened to, and a couple things that sealed the deal. And so now here I am. I'm out, and that's the bulk of my story, I guess, right there.
Okay. So what would you say, or you said a few, would you say 2, 3, 7? What are like the top 2 reasons that really sealed the deal for you?
One of the big things is the lack of accountability from leadership. They tend to want to hide things, or they don't talk about them until someone else kind of forces their hand. They don't talk about them. So there's a lack of accountability, which I really struggle with, because I really struggle with that in general. I struggle with myself, with my children, with my family, other people. Like, I struggle if you're not willing to take accountability for what's going on in your life, mostly because you can't improve, you can't grow from the struggles that you're having if you don't acknowledge that they exist.
Right.
And so I really struggle with that. I think that was probably the number one, is just the inability to take accountability for what's going on. Kind of adjacent to that, there's some lying going on as well too, and I think that's just kind of it's kind of its own thing, but a lot of it is going along with just not being able to be accountable for things.
Are you talking about the
from
leaders
the leadership
or
of the church?
lying?
Yeah, from the leadership
to the members, yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. I think that's the biggest thing. There's lots of other things that are going on too, but they're, in my mind, not as big of a deal, more minor. I could probably deal with them, or could have probably dealt with them, and maybe even in the future could deal with those things if there was full accountability for what has happened, what's going on, the things that have happened. So, yeah, there's lots of other little things, but mostly it comes down to the inability of church leadership to be accountable for just everything, for their history mostly.
Yeah. I feel like the kind of the thing, like the straw that broke the camel's back, was watching them be dishonest about the SEC fines. And the, like, we purposefully were hiding this for these reasons. And I felt like that was kind of the turning point for you. Is that accurate? Or, because I mean, we've sort of talked about it privately, but we haven't really delved into it, because once again, our time alone has been very limited over the last several months.
Right. We haven't really delved into it too much.
Yeah, we haven't talked. Like, we're not speaking right
that's
now.
That's not true. I think that was a very clear and present example in my own life right now of that tendency. And so if you look back historically and you see these things, and then you talk about, like, for instance, Joseph Fielding Smith and hiding the earliest account of the first vision, and then just putting it back in and not talking about the fact that had happened or why. Like, if he had just come out then and said, look, I hid this, that was probably a bad idea. Let me explain why. I hid this. I was concerned. I didn't really know what to do with this at the time, and I'm concerned that this might pull people, might make you doubt your faith and doubt your belief in what I believe is God's church, blah, blah, blah. If he had done that, then I think that there would be no conversation about it at all right now. This is, 50, 60 years later. But there wasn't any of that. But that was in the 1960s. Then you talk about the end of racism, the end of the ban on the priesthood
ban. Racism
so
is
not
still
really
very
the end
alive.
of racism, but that's kind of what the church considers, quote unquote, the end of racism in the church. Oh, well, we gave everybody everything, so racism is over, which isn't really true. But that's kind of the way the church looks at it. The end of racism, 1978. Those are all still just kind of distant things for me. They have some applicability into my daily life, but they're distant. And so then you get further and further closer to where we are. And that, of course, the SEC, and the way that the church handled the SEC and the abuse, child abuse, molestation, things that are going on. Those are very real and poignant to me right now as issues that continue. And so the SEC thing was just kind of that, here it is, right now, here's a modern example that in reality, for church members, in 2-3 years, it will have faded away to nothing if nothing else happens.
Right.
It will have faded away to nothing. Most members will either not even know about it or not care about it, not even remember that it happened. And the church wins on that. There's no talk about it. This discussion is over. They win. And so that's kind of that issue, is that it's
right. You were almost like, leaders, please show up and stand up and say, hey, we got advised to do it this way. We chose not to do that. We take accountability for making a choice that compromised our integrity. We are doing everything we can to fix it. Let's move forward. Like, they signed the letter in the SEC stuff saying this was purposefully done. This was an intentional dishonesty thing, and the reason was this. But then, so they signed that, and then they came back and they were like, oh, well, we took the advice of the people who represented us. It wasn't really our fault. We're going to shift the blame to somebody else. And so, like, on paper, they said one thing, but then what they're saying with their words, it just didn't match.
Yeah.
And that was really
one
aggravating.
final piece to that I think is kind of applicable. We just finished the cult series where we spent 11 episodes talking about cultism and aspects of cultism. And so as I look at that example of the SEC letter, and I look at the way that we're responding, the ex-Mormon community responds, kind of up in an uproar about it. And there's been a lot of members that have left over this as well. But then I look at the way that my family responds to this issue, and it's almost like they just don't care at all. And I see a lot of that cult mentality that we've talked about being there, and it almost feels like the cult mentality has completely prevented them from seeing it from a different perspective. And that's scary to me. It's scary because I've been in that situation. There's a lot of loss and just like angst over the fact that how could I be a part of this for so long and not even recognize it? But then I look at my life and the way that things are taught, and I get exactly why I could be part of it for so long. So seeing people that I care about that are still so unable to just view the material. Like if you view it and you decide to stay in the church, I don't have any issues with that. If the church works for you, great. I don't have any issues with that. But the fact that you cannot even look at the material because you're afraid or whatever.
Well, and it's the persecution.
A
it's the persecution complex. It's the government is coming after us.
Right.
This is a sign that the devil is influencing this. The government's going to try and bring the church down. There's that, like, your family, God bless your family, but several of your family members just love conspiracy theories and that extremism view of things. And so, that cult-like mentality of we trust our leaders implicitly. Anything that they're telling us over the pulpit is more true than the investigative process. Like, we cannot trust the data because our leaders say, well, that's not how it actually happened, despite the tangible data in front of them. Yeah.
Right. I've never met a person in my life that deserved being trusted implicitly.
Right.
It's just not there. Now, I can choose to trust somebody implicitly, but that doesn't mean that they deserve it. So that's an issue as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things, Mason, that you're kind of pointing to is what our next series is going to be on, which is on truth-telling. And it's almost like the leaders don't trust their members with the truth.
Right.
We're going to withhold the truth of what's actually going on because we don't trust that our members can handle the truth.
Yeah.
So the leaders depend on their members to do everything that they say. Like, there's that codependent thing where the leaders are literally micromanaging the members' lives because they cannot trust the members to stay inside the organization and to still be obedient if they know the truth. And so, our next series, our producer was like, hey, let's keep these series things up. And so we said, I think that's a great idea. So we're going to be doing the next several episodes on truth-telling. And the value of truth-telling and kind of exploring that a little bit. Hey, head on over to Amazon and buy your copy of Trauma Bonded, a true story of navigating attachments Forged in Complex PTSD by me, Sarah Westbrook.
So where are you? Stop pestering me. Gosh, I feel harassed. Where are you?
Do you really?
No, not at all.
I'm going to flip you off.
Oh, that would be rude.
There you go. All right, I feel better. I flipped him off, y'all. Okay, squirrel. Alrighty, so let's see. This episode will be dropping for our listeners on September 4th. So where am I at? Well, my book comes out in 2 days. If you're listening to this the day that this episode drops. If not, then my book is probably out, which is Trauma Bonded, a true story of navigating attachments forged in complex PTSD. It has been a life-altering experience. So we are in right now, so we're recording this in August, but we have had several people who have purchased the book in its pre-sale time period.
Right.
And we are starting to get the feedback, the preliminary feedback. So my book sat number 1 in new releases in Mormonism and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for its first several days out. I want to say that we were number 1 for 6 or 7 days in both categories.
Ironic,
on
of
the
course,
book.
because it's not really a Mormon book or
Right.
anything, but that's where it was.
And then I'm in now the top, I think I'm at like number 250 in Christian self-help, and I'm in the top 500 for women's biographies, and the book hasn't even come out yet. So that has just been an incredible experience. And then the reviews that we're getting, like people keep telling me I couldn't put the book down. I was addicted to it. I stayed up all night reading it.
Right.
And just the fact I've had so many people reach out to me. So if you're listening to this and you've been one of those people that have reached out to me, or if you've read the book or you're going to read the book and you want to reach out to me, you can do so at DaisyGirlCommunications at gmail.com. But one of the things that has just been phenomenal is people saying, I relate to this.
Yes.
Like you have spoken the
Yes.
things I cannot say out loud, that my vulnerability has really helped them find courage in themselves. And so it's just, I don't know, it hasn't been officially released, Mason, but with these first few reviews and things coming in, it's like all of that effort, all of the hardship and trauma of writing that book, it just all feels worth it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
I'm
for
telling
sure.
you, I literally dedicated, 18 months, I'm going to say, from start to finish of like sitting down and being dedicated to writing the actual book that is now in y'all's hands. To release day,
I don't know
launch
if it's been
day.
quite 18 months, but it's certainly been close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the writing of that and having to relive the trauma as I wrote it. And then every single
edit it
major
over
edit.
and over again.
Oh my God. I cannot even, it has been an emotional roller coaster, and then recording it. And now so I'm in August. So the audiobook will drop on September 6th as well. But now I'm in the process of listening to the finalized audio files. So I get to do it one more time. And I swear, after I listen to these audio files and approve them, I do not want to pick that book up for a while. I need a break from reliving all of that. But it feels like that effort and that journey is worth it. If I am giving, 1 to 5 people a voice, then the efforts were just worth it. So that is it's been incredible and humbling and exciting all at once.
Yeah, and that's what you've been talking about. I think we initially talked about, voices, and that will come in another one. But I looked back over your Facebook profile and just for the last several days, and a good majority of it is just stories or statements about being able to open up and being able to speak what is true for you and just opening up your voice. And I think that's one of the things I feel most proud of from this podcast is that we've been able to allow people to speak, even if it's just a few. And I know it's more than that, but even if it's just a few, I'm very proud of that people are able to speak what's inside, because almost like accountability again. If you can't talk it, you can't speak it. And talking with like Brene Brown, like if you can't speak the shame, it consumes you from the inside out. But as soon as you start to speak it, it starts to lose its power and its grip on you. And I'm grateful for that.
Speak vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because when you speak your vulnerability, shame dissipates. So I definitely feel very raw and naked in the book. You get to see the worst parts of my life, and where I just did not show up well at all.
Me too, by the way.
Yeah.
You get to see some of that rawness.
Yeah, you're welcome, Mason. I spoke your vulnerability on your behalf, right?
Yeah, thank you.
That's probably why you've got so many colleagues like checking in with you right now. Like, wow, Mason, we had no idea what you were going through. Sarah. Alrighty. Let's see what else is going on in my life. So I start my PhD here in the next couple of weeks. So that's pretty exciting and overwhelming. And because of that, I'm actually going to be stepping down a little bit from clinical work. I'm still going to do it, but I'm not going to be taking as many new patients for the next little while because I feel inspired to write and create more content. And specifically, I am going to start writing the book, Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. It is time for me to get that book out of my head and onto the paper.
Yes,
and so that's what I will be doing. And then the other really exciting thing is I spent about 8 hours with a videographer, and he will be dropping TikToks, like one TikTok a week, I believe is what we're looking at. And so if you want to subscribe to the TikTok channel, it's at DGC Sarah Westbrook. So DGC is Daisy Girl Communications. And then my name's Sarah Westbrook. Sarah is Sarah. Okay. My parents, the one thing they did right was spell my name correctly. So Sarah.
The one thing, huh?
The one
I'm sure
thing.
They did a few other things
right
as well.
They did a lot of things right. Westbrook. So DGC Sarah Westbrook. That's going to be on TikTok, and we're going to have lots of good information there. And a little bit of sass. He definitely got me a little snarky and telling some really mean jokes about my religion.
Oh,
some
good.
Did you know?
Sass, that'll be something new.
Yeah, right? I'm never sassy. What are you talking about? All righty. So, yeah, that's what's going on here for Sarah.
All right. So what do we do well? Let's move on.
How did we do? Yeah, so when we listened to that
How
first...
did we do, I guess?
How did we do? When Mason, when you and I listened to that, so our producer's going to put in some sound bites, and I'm going to give y'all the timestamps per Spotify's timestamps. So depending on what platform you're listening on, it might be, these timestamps might be a little bit off. But as we listened, I was really listening for what were some of the patterns and the themes that we were talking about. And so our first soundbite was that we wanted to challenge polarized thinking and through example model for our listeners how you can talk to people when there's a disagreement. And so the soundbite that we're going to play for you right now is from minute marker 55:43 to either 56:11 or 56:14, depending on if you want that last little thought there. So we're going to go ahead and play that for you now, and we'll be right back. Where my experiential expertise lies. And so we really want to make this an open place for discussion. We want to make this podcast a place where we really challenge polarized thinking. So that we can foster community, so that we can model how to talk to people about having differences in beliefs and values and goals and still love them and honor their humanity and engage with them on a regular basis. Like, you can be Mormon and have non-Mormon friends and have a blast together, and it doesn't need to be this competition thing. So I really want to focus on that. I want to be able to demonstrate that we can do this, and I'm going to be bringing guests on. I've got a whole list of guests that are going to come on and talk about
Brene Brown.
Unfortunately, Brene Brown is not on my schedule yet. Hint, hint. That's so terrible. Not terrible. That's exciting. Hopefully, that would be awesome. Like, that is a dream come true. That would be a dream come true. All right, Mason. So how do you think we did?
Well, let's see. What were you talking about? Challenging polarized thinking I feel like we did all right. I feel like in general you do a really good job of that, and it's been a struggle for me, mostly in recognition. Like once I recognize that that's what I've done, if I've said something that is very polarized, you call attention to it. I don't feel like I have a hard time backing down from the polarized thinking, but just the initial thoughts oftentimes are still that way. But I feel like in general we've done well. What did you think?
So I actually am surprised you think I did well. So thank you for the compliment. I disagree. Of course I do.
Of course you do.
Of course I do. No, I feel like I definitely got caught in some traps of being a little bit more polarized on the ex-Mormon side. Like kind of that, I know, right? That there are times where that trauma for me still shows up. And it's, it's really interesting. So we just cleaned out a whole bunch of books at our house, right? Because we're trying to downsize and get rid of stuff that we're not using. And we went through a lot of our Mormon books. And one of the things I was thinking about, because Mason, you stopped by the church and just put the books out in the foyer, basically with a sign that says, "Free, take me home."
I didn't write anything on them because there was some stuff already on the box. But what I was going to write is "to a still faithful family." And I didn't end up doing that. But that's probably, that probably fits my character better to not write that down.
But anyway, when I even thought about going into the foyer to drop the books off, I had a little bit of a panic response. And so I think that there were definitely times where I was more on the other end rather than being a little bit more neutral. But as far as like modeling how to have respectful dialogue, I definitely feel like we hit that one. I think that you and I, for the most part, have done that really well. And for the couple of...
And we've also used examples along the way of dialogue that isn't respectful to help...
Right.
To help everybody kind of just see how that can go wrong and what we can do differently.
Yeah.
I agree. So I feel like we've done a pretty good job of modeling that.
Yeah, I feel like we did that really well. We had a lot of content in talking to people. Thank you to the Westbrook family and for putting all of your drama on Facebook so that, we could be like, hey, this is public. Let's go ahead and talk about it. And so I feel like with that kind of stuff, I feel like we did the best that we knew how to do in the moment. I think that we did a really good job of identifying where maybe we were not utilizing the skills that we've been talking about here. But I think that in season 2, we have the ability to be a little bit less polarized. Now, I'm not saying that we were a lot polarized. Right. I just feel like we need to have the accountability for... Hey, there were times, especially for Sarah, where I got a little bit salty. And I know that saltiness is still going to come out, but I'm hoping that over time it can be maybe a little less crass. Now, you're still going to get the language because, fuck, that's who I am. But I just wanted to drop that F-bomb for fun. Squirrel. But... because the second one, let's actually just talk about the second one. Our second soundbite and goal was to not attack character. And I think that's really when we talk about the polarized thinking, I struggle with not attacking character when I'm passionate about something. And so I think that there were definitely some times where I stepped out of being analytical and into a little bit of a character attack, especially with your brother and occasionally the top leadership of the church. So this soundbite, let's see how we did. Mason, before you comment on how we did, we're going to listen to soundbite. So this is at the 1 hour, 9 minute and 19 second to the 1 hour, 10 minute and 50 second. That's our little soundbite. So you can listen to that now. The other thing that I think it was that we had said was really important, and we came up with an example that we wanted to share today, is that our goal is to not or never, I can't say that we never will because we're human and we're going to F it up on occasion. okay? But we want to be able to demonstrate how you can identify toxic patterns of behaviors, that we can talk about differences in belief systems or differences of opinion without attacking an individual's character. We want to be a safe place where you can disagree without having your humanity or your character attacked. And so one of the examples that we talked about...
And before you go to the example, there's a reason for that, right?
Right.
And for me, and maybe there's multiple reasons, I expect that there are, but for me in particular, when someone starts to attack character, and this happened on both sides of every argument, right? There's people in the church that do it, there's people outside of the church that do it.
Absolutely.
And any particular situation. But the main reason for me that it matters is because when you start to attack someone's character, it's because you're trying to stop the conversation.
Right, you're trying to silence them.
You're trying to silence that person, right? Mm-hmm. If you can say, yeah, well, you sleep around, so obviously your opinion on this subject doesn't matter.
Right.
Then you've shut up the conversation instead of taking value from what they have to say.
Right.
And so that's what we don't ever want to be in, that situation where we're trying to shut up the conversation. We may not agree with you. We may say, hey, it's time to move on from this idea.
We're not going to silence.
But we're not going to silence you and say, you're a schmuck.
So there you have it.
Wow.
I think that initially was one of our most important things, that we wanted to be able to get on here and talk about the issues and talk about what we can do with them without attacking the people that are causing the problems. What are you smiling at?
I'm having a really hard time not laughing. I'm going to rephrase that. This was, I think, the most important thing for you, Mason.
Okay.
Because I wanted to attack some character. There's a little bit of anger there. And so calling President Nelson a liar and a narcissist, that felt really good for me. Not going to lie.
Well, and frankly, when someone is a leader of what is essentially a multinational, multi-billion-dollar organization, I think that sometimes a character has to be addressed, and there has to be some, you have to be able to recognize where character is not, the purported character is not what we're seeing through some examples. So I don't know that saying he's a liar and a narcissist is necessarily a true attack on his character as much as it is, hey, look, this is what we're looking at. In my opinion, this is what this demonstrates. It's not like you're out with a sign or it's all over Facebook talking about this, and this is now your issue. You're going to bring down Russell M. Nelson. That's not what's going on. But when you draw attention to the fact that something is not as it seems, it might feel like it's a character attack. I feel like that's happened a lot with my family as well, that they feel like what I have done is a character attack on them. But when I look back at what I've said, I don't really feel that way. In fact, I don't feel that way at all. Although on occasion I'll make mistakes too on what I say, and I try to call attention to that that's not what I was trying to do or whatever. I'm sorry or whatever. But ultimately, I think that the big issue with character attacks is that it stops discussion.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I don't feel like we've done anything on this podcast that stops the discussion about things. And I think that's why I would say that we've done a pretty good job of not attacking character, because we have not tried to end the discussion on anything that we've talked about. We've just simply said, hey, this is what we're thinking. This is what's going on. This is what you do with this. Take it and do what you want with it.
Right.
Rather than, hey, Russell M. Nelson's this narcissist and y'all should walk away. You should just leave him alone, right?
That's what I wanted to say, but that's not what I said.
Well, and that's why, because that's what we're trying to avoid.
Right. Well, and I think it's important, when we're talking, Mason, you're talking about a character attack to end the conversation. What I'm talking about is more along the lines of evaluating character and analyzing how past behaviors influence future behaviors. So if I know that somebody has a difficult time with being honest or accountable, what am I going to do with that information in order to move forward in the relationship, either with that individual or with the organization that they represent, or within my workplace? What am I going to do? And so I think that there's oftentimes a fine line there, where it goes from a character evaluation to a character attack. And I think that intent and then checking in with, how did this actually go? Like, did what I say stop conversation? Because definitely episode number, I think it's 17, is The Prophet, a Narcissist, or something along those lines, is one of our most popular episodes. And a lot of the reason it's probably the most popular is because your Aunt Africa had so much to say about it. And she definitely engaged in some character attacks. Basically, instead of talking about how we had addressed things, instead of talking about how we addressed things, she attacked my credentials. She was a little nutty there. So if you're wondering what's going on, just go back to episode 17 and then just listen through any of the ones about Aunt Africa and Mason's family drama.
And just to be clear, nutty is not a character attack, right?
Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
The world's most exciting podcast, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, New York Times best-selling author and National Radio Hall of Fame inductee, Michael Savage.
I'm Michael Savage, host of the Savage Nation podcast, home of borders, language, and culture. Be here or be nowhere. The Savage Nation podcast.
Catch the Michael Savage podcast on all podcast platforms every Tuesday and every Friday.
And that is where Sarah struggles. And it's actually a trauma response for me, because I grew up in a home where if you had a different opinion, instead of trying to understand either the difference of opinion or the breakdown in communication, it was very borderline and narcissist in the sense of name calling, criticizing, sarcastic humor. You're so stupid. You wouldn't even know that. You don't have enough life experience. Right. I mean, if you're reading in my book, you're going to be seeing things like, my dad forced me basically to quit cheerleading because after I'd had sex at 16, if I wore the short skirts in cheerleading, it was basically like me saying, hey, anybody else, now I'm an open door for anybody else who wants to stick their dick in me. That's kind of the way that my dad did that. And so I have learned from the time I was little that if you want your voice to be the most, what's the word I'm looking for, heard, if you want to basically win the argument, and if I want to feel like I'm coming out on top, the way to do that is to cut the other person down so that way they seem small, and to dehumanize them. And so, yes, Mason, when I said your aunt is nutty, while many people would agree with me after listening to what we said and read from her and the evidence, many people might disagree, but my use of calling her that name is definitely a character attack, and I definitely need to work on it. So we need to do better at evaluation and analyzing. Well, I'm making up words.
One of the words that we use the most in talking about what we were wanting to do was to model. Right. And I think that in order to model, we have to recognize where we've done things correctly and where we've done things incorrectly. Like, we didn't come onto this podcast because we're the perfect examples, not by any stretch of the imagination.
I am too. I love. Shut up. Hey, I'm going to throw something at you. Have some sticky notes.
Oh, man, don't do that to me.
Brat. Oh.
Anyway, if we can recognize where we have done things not the way that we intend, I think that that's very helpful. And so just, like I just said with a little sarcasm, yeah, that's not a character attack at all, is it? I think that we can recognize that that is kind of what it is.
Right.
And then you can examine and go, well, okay, this is why. Because the more you understand about yourself and why you do something, and this is for you as the listener as well, the more you understand yourself and why you do something, the more ability you have to decide and then to change it if that's what you want to do. Mm-hmm. You might look at it and go, you know what, I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm snarky and I'm just not going to work on that. Or I just don't have the time to work on that, or that's not my priority. Or you might go, you know what, that's completely out of my character. Let me fix that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the greatest strengths of our relationship is that you can call me out and I can call you out in that joking way. And, then we'll respond snarkily, then we'll have a good laugh, and then we can have a serious conversation. That's just the dynamic of Sarah and Mason, y'all. So
only here where the only thing that you can throw at me is, paper.
Well, either that or my shoe. My shoes are slip-ons.
Yes, it's a powerful part of our relationship.
I have on some Hey Dudes. They just slip on. I'm going to just toss them at your head.
And we all need someone in our life that has the ability to call us out without making it a character attack, without making it a shaming thing. In fact, Brene Brown talks about that in her first book. You need that person that you can share those experiences with, and they don't blast you for it.
Yeah,
they simply listen.
My closest friends in the world are those that can call me out on my bullshit without making me feel small.
Yes.
And I love that. You also, everybody, y'all need somebody who can lovingly throw a shoe at your head when, the situation calls for it.
Where would I find somebody like that?
She's sitting right here, baby. Open your eyes.
Oh.
Alrighty.
Is that who that is?
Yeah. So our last one that we wanted to talk about over and over again, Mason, you're right. We talked about we wanted to model. We wanted to set an example. And one of the things that we talked about is we wanted to demonstrate how to hold space for those who have a different opinion for us. And then the ability to value humanity through story and example. And so soundbite 5706 and to 5717.
5817.
Yes, you're correct. You're correct,
So 5706 to 5817.
Thank you for calling me out on my bullshit once again. Yes.
I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but yay me.
It's because my handwriting, I wrote the 58 over the 57, and anyway. So 5706 to 5817, we talked about being able to start by building a community here. And I think also joining the other post-Mormon, ex-Mormon, ex-religious trauma, ex-religious, whatever. We wanted to build community, and that our goal was to add in behavioral health and mental health skills for that from a clinical perspective as we added our voice to those in the ex-Mormon community. So we are going to give you a moment here to listen to soundbite 5706 to 5817. Here it comes. One of the biggest losses that I've found in faith transition is losing your community. We talk about that shunning that happens, and I want to hold space for my Mormon friends who say, "Oh no, that doesn't happen. We don't treat people differently when they're not Mormon." And I'm here to tell you from my experience, y'all suck at assimilation when people disagree with you. And I want for us as a community to come together and really challenge that. I want to be able to have this be a place where we can model that. My slogan on all of my businesses is learn, grow, become. That sets my intention for my professional life. It sets my intention for my book. It's setting my intention for these podcasts, is that I want for people to be able to come here, learn stuff, all kinds of different things, take what resonates from them so that they can grow and challenge themselves and then become who they are as an expression of their most authentic self. Thank you. And we're back. Alrighty. So one of the things for me, Mason, that I wrote down when I listened to this soundbite is that I definitely feel like I attacked the Mormon side more, and I need to, in season 2, kind of do a little bit more of holding the post-Mormon side of this community accountable for the toxic communication patterns that we are still engaging in. I think it's really hard sometimes because it's it's really hard to not just blame the religious organization you're coming out of, because it's like, well, they did that to me, therefore I'm going to do it back. And I think the hardest part of, being non-toxic in the way that we communicate with each other is recognizing when our amygdala has taken over, so that way we can disengage until the emotionality of it is calmed down. And I'm not talking about ignoring the emotions. Like, this is Mason and I, we watch that 70s show quite a bit right now, and Red on that 70s show is constantly talking about, I'm stuffing my emotions inside where they belong.
That's right.
Right. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about when you recognize that your fight or flight system has been activated, that deep breathing, physiologically soothing, going for a walk, taking some movement until you can get on the other side of that emotional experience, and now you're able to respond more authentically to who you are striving to be. That is so hard, because your amygdala response is fight now, run away now, attack now, hide now, freeze now, people please now, smooth it over now. And so learning how to delay your response so that you can honor who you want to be is the hardest step. At least that's what I'm seeing for my clients. I do this perfectly. I never say shit I shouldn't say. Thank you, Mason, for calling me out on my BS. No, seriously, this is also the hardest thing for me. And even though I'm now at, 9 years? Let's see, 12 years. 12 years of clinical experience in working through this stuff. Sometimes my amygdala still absolutely gets the best of me.
You're still fighting biology, right? It's still the body's normal response. And so you're not always going to have the ability to respond differently. It's really about learning how you're responding and learning to change that response or recover more quickly from that response so you can be what you want. You mentioned something about blaming. Blaming is a normal part of some of the trauma and struggle that we go through.
That's human.
But
all humans do it.
It doesn't generally help us to overcome a situation. So we just have to recognize, oh man, you know what? I'm blaming again. That's not what I want to be doing. How do I manage this differently? And gradually you'll do it differently, and blame won't be an issue most of the time.
Right. Well, I actually had a client the other day who said, I feel like I'm always blaming my biology. And what we worked through is, don't blame the biology, honor the biology.
Right.
If I recognize that I have a neurochemical response going on in my brain and I need to let it run its course in order to show up in this community in a more healthy way that feels more true to who I want to be, then I can honor the process, and that delay in responding can be more comfortable, because it's always uncomfortable. It's that you need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Right.
And it's not necessarily I'm going to get comfortable with being uncomfortable as much as it's identifying that the discomfort is temporary, and that as you work through it, things end better on the other side. And sometimes when we're engaging with people who do not have that same skill set, we have to take a lot of breaks. And I think that's one of the benefits of a text. It's okay to accidentally on purpose leave your phone in your glove box and go inside and just not see how many times you're being texted, in order to put some time and distance and whatnot. It's a lot easier today because of technology although I think we don't practice it as much because of technology as well. But I think that honoring self-care and saying, hey, I'm not in the brain space to take any more. I'm going to shut the power off on my phone and I'm going to go practice some self-care. I'm going to go take a bath. I'm going to do some deep breathing. I'm going to hit the gym. I'm going to, spend some quality time with my family. And then I'm going to come back to this conversation when I'm back in my frontal cortex and my physiology is calmed down. We have a lot better chance of being successful in the ways that we want to be successful.
There might be a fine line between acknowledging your biology and blaming your biology, but there is still a line. Yeah. And so if you can get used to acknowledging, that's we talked a couple episodes ago about neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, norepi, those kind of things.
What's the last one? Come on. What's that fourth one? You don't work with that fourth one very often in your field.
In your oxytocin.
What is it? Yay! Gold star. You get the gold star.
Well, the other main one is epinephrine, which is adrenaline. But you, as a person, you don't really decide at all which transmitters get released. Your body does that on its own. And so then your body responds to those transmitters on its own. There's nothing you can do about what gets released, with the exception of afterwards kind of training yourself to manage the situation in a way that is more frontal cortex-y. It's more in the way that you
should be
want
a neurobiologist, Mason.
Oh yeah, that's the technical term for sure.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
But the idea being that you cannot control what your body releases or how your body responds to it. But you can afterwards analyze the situation and manage it so that you respond differently in the future. Or you learn to start responding differently in the future. You can do that, but if you can't do that if you don't acknowledge, hey, that was just the way my body responded. Now where do I go?
Right.
And you can't really do it if you say, well, that's just my biology. There's nothing I can do about it. Both of those things really prevent you from being able to move forward. But you have to be able to acknowledge it to move forward.
Yeah. You don't have to, but it definitely helps.
I think that to move forward, I'm not sure that you can't. I'm not sure that you can move forward without acknowledging the fact that this is what's going on.
Yeah.
But that's also not necessarily a linear process. You might be able to move forward a little bit and then come to the understanding of that's what's going on.
Well, and speaking for myself, one of the things that's become very helpful is as I've mastered this and practiced this for years. I mean, y'all, I learned about this system while I was in school. I really started putting it to practice when my son Brig was very, very small and was destroying stuff. And it was, I don't want to parent like my dad. I have to recognize that, okay, this is a true story, y'all. He painted a shit mural all over the bathroom wall again. You know what? My life is not ending. If I walk away, the shit will still be there in an hour when I'm ready to come back and clean it up without beating this child of mine who has no concept of how nasty that was. And so really you begin to, as you practice this, you begin to recognize that when your brain is saying this is life-threatening and you have to respond now, you can begin to recognize it rarely is life-threatening. Almost everything can wait until you are through that panic response. And so I don't remember what we were doing yesterday, and I got a little bit nervous and panicky. I think it was when we were leaving the Ed Sheeran. Yeah, it was. We were walking. So we were leaving the stadium and there was this huge line to go through the tunnel to get down to the lower parking lot. And I started to have a little bit of a panic attack because my left leg, part of the MS, wasn't able to shift my weight as smoothly, and so I kept almost falling, and Hayden was walking with his arm around my waist and pulling me up, and people were impatient and pushing around me, and I was like having a panic attack because I didn't want to be embarrassed and fall over right in front of all these people. Like, can you imagine what would have happened if I had a pass out episode right there at that moment? It would have been entertaining, for sure. But it's not something that would have necessarily been helpful. And so I was feeling a little panicked, trying not to have a full-blown MS, fall down, embarrassing moment.
Right.
And I remember my hands started to tremble, and there was that part of my brain that was definitely in the fight or flight response. But then there was that little voice from my frontal cortex going, hey, look at your panic response showing up. That's not helpful. And then I was able to just go, nope, you're right, Sarah, that's not helpful. And I just took a couple of deep breaths and I was like, it's not a big deal if you move slower. These people do not know you. They can be like, we were behind the slowest lady on the planet. What the hell? And one of the interesting things is there were only maybe 10 people that were pushing past me in a dangerous way and being rude. Most everybody else was happily patient, recognizing that everybody's getting out of this. Most people out there were very respectful. Right. And then the one lady noticed me and she was like, whoa, why do people keep pushing around you? You don't look so good. And she cleared the way and was like, let this lady pass. And that was a little embarrassing, of course. But I very much appreciated being noticed for struggling to walk in that moment, which is just something that happens with my MS. Every now and at the end of the day, it's the end of the day. I'm tired. I'm hot. We just screamed and yelled and exerted a ton of energy for that concert. That's, of course, I always have a harder time in the evening when I'm in an active flare. So, of course, I was struggling at that point. That was expected. I just wasn't expecting that big of a crowd trying to get through that little tunnel to get out. And so, it was just a matter of being like, oh, Sarah, your panic's not helping. You're okay. And so while I was still having the racing heart and a little bit of the tremors, my brain was not stuck in, oh my God, you're going to fall over. People are going to trample you, whatever. It was just take some deep breaths. You're good. Hayden's got you. Mason's right there. Everything's fine. This is temporary. Yep. So that was really good. So I would say, Mason, overall, I would say we won some and we lost some, just like I would have expected.
Right.
I think goals for season 2 is to be a little more neutral and gentle so we can present the facts. I'm still going to get snarky, but maybe more playful snarky. And that we really want to, again, I'm going to set the same goal. We want to be cautious with character attacks. We want to stay in a place where we are evaluating and analytical rather than attacking in a disrespectful or rude manner. We are going to do a Westbrook What's Up moment. And so here is our first.
It's not scary at all.
Westbrook's What's Up. And this is it. So last night, we're exhausted today, y'all, because last night we went to the Ed Sheeran concert in Kansas City at the Chiefs Arrowhead Stadium. Mason, what did you think?
I thought it was terrific. I think if it's not the best concert I've ever been to, it's certainly the second best. And he is just incredibly talented. I've felt that way before, but then just watching him on stage and his performance and just most of the music he did just by himself.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
It was my absolute favorite concert that we've ever been to.
It was hot.
Yes,
that was a little rough.
It was hot and humid.
It was awesome.
And we were sitting on the side of the stadium for all of the pre-shows. So we had Kat Burns and
Khalid.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Khalid were the opening acts. And during their opening acts, the sun was blazing right into our faces. So I'm actually a little bit sunburned right here from that. Just a tiny bit. I don't think you can see it, but I can feel it.
You can feel it, yeah.
I'm exaggerating a little bit about how bad it is. No, seriously, I got a little sun-kissed.
Well,
and
who wouldn't
whatnot.
want to kiss you? So
Yeah, I agree, Mason. I think one of the things that impressed me the most was when Ed said that he usually doesn't have a band, that the only reason he had a band was for Khalid, because he uses a looper, which is for those of you who aren't in the music industry, it is a foot pedal contraption that records, and then depending on how you hit the pedals, it'll loop over and over and over again. So he was creating his own percussion with his mouth and his guitar, his own background sound, his own vocals, his own harmony, everything right there in front of us.
Yeah. If you've seen Pitch Perfect 3, that's what Anna Kendrick does at the very end with her final performance. She has a looper, and so she does her own looped vocals and kind of makes that. It doesn't actually stay that way. The movie adds in other stuff as well,
right,
but that's how she starts it out. And that's how Ed Sheeran did almost everything, was just with that looper. He played everything.
Yeah, he said that that's what he's done for the entire 18 years of his career.
Yeah.
Which is just incredible. So an incredibly talented musician for sure.
Yeah.
But so number one, I think it's important to say that one of the things that I love most about Ed Sheeran is he saved my life. Truly. When I was at my absolute worst, right after the nervous breakdown, when I was suicidal, maybe it was right before. It was right before, because I was sitting in the car and I threw the keys out, and I was sitting there and I was having such a hard time. I was at the verge of that nervous breakdown, and his song "Save Myself" was playing on my phone. I had it like Pandora on my phone.
Serendipity.
So I had thrown my keys out of the car, and my phone kept playing. Like it came off the like Bluetooth or whatever of the phone and just started playing on my phone. And I had never heard the song before of Save Myself. And it came on, and I literally sat there in tears. After the song was done playing, I got out, found my keys, got to safety, and ended up going to the psych hospital. So Ed Sheeran truly saved my life. But my favorite moment of last night's concert was when he fucked up. And he starts and he and I mean, other than the fact when he called out the fight that was going on the floor, that was hilarious too. You guys, seriously, it should be all over the news. I haven't checked, but we're like, I don't know, 2 songs into his concert, he's talking to the audience and he's like, "Hey guys, stop fighting," like to these guys right in the audience, and he's pointing to security. "Hey, there's 2 guys over here fighting. Guys, I'm about ready to play a game. Knock it off." Like, it was hilarious. But no, my favorite part of the concert was when he messed up on the loop and he stopped and he said, "Hey, I got to start this over. My timing was off. Even I mess up sometimes." And I absolutely loved that moment of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I also loved it. Did he say his friend's name was Jamal, correct?
I believe so.
That story from his song. What song was it that he sang afterwards? I don't remember the song, but it was
I don't remember either.
February. It was a song that's February that he wrote after losing his friend Jamal, and it just warmed my heart. So anyway, had an absolute blast. I'm probably an Ed Sheeran lover the same way I'm a Brene Brown lover.
That's serious right there.
His music is so raw and from the soul, like from the heart, that can relate to just everybody because of the vulnerability that he puts into his music. Just love him. So that is our Westbrook Was Up moment.
My favorite moment, by the way, was when he had started singing Perfect. And he stopped right in the middle because somebody had a sign out that said, "Do our gender reveal for us." And he stopped right in the middle of the song.
Right.
And he's like, "I got to stop. I've never done this before. Let's do it." And so he took the envelope. And he's like, "I'll get back to Perfect in a minute."
Yeah, he's like, "I'm just stopping
the gender
for a
reveal.
minute."
There was no like drama or anything. He grabbed the envelope, he opened it up, and he said, "Girl." And he said, "As the father of 2 girls, it's great." And then he went right back to the song, and it was pretty cool. So
yeah.
I like that kind of spontaneous stuff. It's not just they're just singing the songs,
right.
but
He was being
there's a
him
passion
on stage
for the music. There's a passion for the performing, And like, I love it. It was also 2 hours long with a really good encore. And
Yeah.
So it was a terrific show.
Yeah, it was like 2.5 hours. By the time all was said and done, it was like 2.5 hours of Ed Sheeran back to back. And he's an amazing performer. Like, yeah, I'm not a fan of Garth Brooks' music. Everybody shoot me right now.
I will.
Mason.
You may not get an episode 2 on this one.
Mason is a fan of Garth Brooks, but one of the things I loved about Garth Brooks' concert was his ability to engage the audience.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I feel like Ed Sheeran totally like 1-upped, 10-upped, whatever, Garth Brooks in engaging the audience and singing harmony with us. It was just amazing, y'all. Like, I would love to have a moment to just sit down with Ed Sheeran at coffee and just talk passion with music, because music was my first career, and now I'm in mental health, and now I'm in podcasting and creating content. Alrighty.
Okay,
So
music was my first desired career. I just never got anywhere.
that's because I said, Mason, if you're serious about this, let's go get vocal lessons. And you were like, and never mind.
Yeah, didn't get very far.
Yeah, that's a good story. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
The world's most exciting podcast, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, New York Times best-selling author and National Radio Hall of Fame inductee, Michael Savage.
I'm Michael Savage, host of the Savage Nation podcast, home of borders, language, and culture. Be here or be nowhere. The Savage Nation podcast.
Catch the Michael Savage podcast on all podcast platforms every Tuesday and every Friday.
So do you have anything else you want to add, my dear?
I think that I would love for some of our listeners to weigh in on how they felt like we did too.
Yes.
I think that you guys can see, because of course this is who we are. This is the way we work this. So send your comments to DaisyGirlCommunications.com and let us know. Weigh in, and some of your comments we're gonna read them and go, holy crap, yeah, that's exactly right. How do we continue this? How do we not do this? Others we're not gonna benefit as greatly from, but we would love to see the comments. One of the things we wanted was discussion and community, and it's hard to do the community thing this way, but the discussion is very helpful in it, and I think that it helps us feel like there's a community, and I think that's very helpful.
Well, so a couple of things, a couple of shout outs on that. Our Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma page and group on Facebook is growing, and that's becoming more active. So yeah, you can reach us there. Find us on Facebook. The other thing is, if you want to, if email is just too much, you're also welcome to text or call and leave a message at the Daisy Girl Communications phone number, which is 573-569-1076. So again, that's 573-569-1076. 1076.
Uh-oh.
So we are looking forward to a fantastic season 2. Also, we will see you in a full episode in 2 days as we honor the September 6th on the day that my book releases and launches and goes live, September 6th, 2023. So thanks so much. We will see you next time. Bye.
Love you guys.
Today's episode was hosted by Sarah and Mason Westbrook, produced by Daisy Girl Communications and Alex Vidalis. We would love to see you on our Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma Facebook page.